review those if there are any corrections or discussions, or if I hear a motion. Does anybody have any questions?
Nope, move approval.
Okay, we have moved to approve by Steve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Sorry. All right. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Passes. All right, follow up to request from the February 18th meeting of the city attorney.
Good evening, everyone. All of these are follow-up items from the last meeting. It's not our intent to go through these in any great detail, but specifically members of the committee asked for these particular items of information. First is the demographer report, which we have provided to you. We provided a soft copy to you all last week. This is Jean Gobelay, the demographer in Saratoga, provided this. This is actually a draft report. This is the only hard copy that we can find in the files. But this is substantially what was presented to the committee in 2011. There's a lot of demographic information in here. Some conclusions reached by Ms. Gobelay, who is not an attorney. She's a demographer. It doesn't really disclose any information which we didn't know already. You know, if it's the will of this committee to get up-to-date demographic information, you know, it's our recommendation that the appropriate time to have a new report provided, because obviously the data will be somewhat different, and that will be quite relevant in any decision to modify the city's election system. So unless there's any questions, we propose we just move on from that. We can obviously come back to this when we dive deeper into the election question. Yes, sir.
I'm probably more of a comment than a question, but when I know that I had asked for a soft copy of some of this, but I was actually expecting or asking for it to be in a spreadsheet so we could manipulate it, make comparisons, etc. When we got it a PDF, it makes it kind of difficult.
All right, very good. We can provide that for the next meeting.
Some people don't have Excel, so that's why the PDF went out for information purposes. So if you don't have Excel, you can have some difficulty viewing it, so just a heads up.
All right, moving on to, we were also asked to provide a list of alternative election systems. There was a PowerPoint provided to the 2011 Charter Review Committee. The printout of the PowerPoint is right here. We can run through this really quick without the actual PowerPoint. If the committee would actually like to see the PowerPoint up here, we can certainly do that.
Nah, we got it.
That's what I thought. Very good. I know, you know, from time to time, some voting rights advocates or voting system advocates will come to our meetings. The two new systems, which we haven't covered already, are cumulative voting and ranked choice voting, which is called a number of different things, either instant runoff voting or proportional representation. There are jurisdictions that use this system: San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and San Leandro, primarily in the East Bay. We're not aware of any jurisdictions in California that use cumulative voting. And again, we can dive deeper on that. There are some significant logistical issues to using an alternative system, and we actually brought in the registrars, the Santa Clara County registrar, to speak to the group in 2011 about what those are. And at the appropriate time, we can certainly do that. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Ranked choice voting. No, that's kind of strange. I've heard of that. Looking at it quickly, we just got this. I can understand it. But did you say that there are some places that will use ranked choice voting?
San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and San Leandro all presently use that system and actually have some election history using that particular system.
Basically,
San Francisco was the first. Oakland and Berkeley flipped within the last 10 years. San Leandro, I'm not sure about. San Leandro is actually pretty close in size to Santa Clara.
It is still basically at large, though. It's not by district.
They do not have districts.
Okay, so it's just at large, but then you rank them. You got 10, and at least your 5 favorites or whatever. Like,
I can speak to it right now.
Well, San Francisco and Oakland use districts, but San Leandro, I think, is at large. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll speak to it because that's how they do it in Australia.
all voting is this system. You have, say, 4 people running for a vote, for a seat. You rank how you want your preferences to go. So I say my second preference will go to Kathy, third to Brian, fourth to Jeannie, and then the people vote that way.
But you rank all of them on the ballot?
You have to rank them
Okay.
all on the ballot. If you don't rank them on the ballot, your vote is cast off. It's invalid. It must be ranked. So then they count all the votes. Say Jeannie doesn't get enough votes. Her second preference, the person that she nominated as her second preference, that vote goes to the next person. So it kind of...
There are multiple variations of ranked choice voting. There's several different hybrid systems. One caution, just from the experience in the 2011 group, analyzing all the different voting systems is a potential rabbit hole. The 2011 group spent months analyzing alternative systems and came back to the
But if it
old
was
system.
still at large, we would still be exposed in terms of, if we had any concern about representation.
Correct. And I'm not trying to dissuade you from discussing those systems, but I cannot provide any assurance that any of those systems would be a safe harbor from a Voting Rights Act claim.
You still wouldn't have a
The
district
only
where somebody
absolute
represents my
certainty in
district.
that is a district system. If there is a legal challenge and a judicially determined problem with our voting system, which has not occurred yet.
Just a quick question, are multi-member districts allowed under California law?
Don't know. They're not specifically prohibited. I'm not aware of any jurisdictions in California that have multi-member districts, but I think that's an open question at this time. I don't see any reason why just in and of itself it would be prohibited. Yep.
So, one more thing. CAC, Citizens Advisory Committee, is actually having Steve Chesson come and talk about the voting system, the electoral systems for Santa Clara, and what are our choices and why do they matter. So if anybody's interested in that, we're having a meeting Monday the 28th of March, and it's hopefully we've got the meeting room. And I can talk to you about that. Sure. Okay. Yeah,
So-
one more comment.
Yeah, so I actually, in our last meeting, Steve, who was the member of the public who came and gave a comment, he talked to us about a presentation that he was going to give in Sunnyvale. So I went, and I think I didn't see anybody else from here go. It was a very good talk, and I'm actually quite pleased that he's going to go and speak to the CAC. I would actually ask that we, when we get to discussing different voting systems, which I know is not today's topic, that we actually invite him in to come and give the presentation to all of us. Some of us may not be able to go to the CAC meeting, and it's extremely relevant for what we are listening to, and I learned a lot from the presentation that I had, and I think we can all learn from that. Even if we choose not to go down any of those paths, it's something to be educated about. So I would ask that we invite him to be a speaker in the meeting in which we talk about different voting systems.
Can I ask a quick question, Ho-san? Was his approach was it something that we're currently looking at? Is it something within reason, or is it something that is his own initiative that he's trying to push?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think there's certainly some initiative which he is trying to push, and he would advocate to us very strongly to go down one certain path over another.
Right.
I think for our purposes, we can be specific in asking him what we would like him to present, and then we would have our own discussion, and then we can ask him to step outside of the conversation, and we can have our own debate at that point.
Yeah.
But I think he has a lot of expertise in these different voting systems, and I think it would only make sense that we learn from somebody who has the knowledge that he has.
Having some interface with Mr. Chesson over the years, I will, to Tino's question, Mr. Chesson is an advocate for this particular system. He is not unbiased. So just as long as everybody understands that perspective. The 2011 group spent, as the clerk said, months analyzing alternate voting systems. It was beyond really the charge of the city council, and arguably is here too. But again, if it's the
And
will of the
maybe
group to
that's-
go down that rabbit hole, we can
Maybe we
certainly
want
do
to
that.
avoid doing months, and this would be a good way to avoid that.
Yeah, I would be interested in hearing about the facts of what it would look like, but I would caution that I don't think that having an advocate pushing his or her personal agenda on this charter would necessarily be appropriate at this time, based on the amount of time we have and based on the direction of council. But
Correct. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to have him paraphrase them in writing as opposed to having him come and speak. We just don't have that kind of time.
But if you want to come to CAC, you're more than welcome. I think that's a great venue for everybody. I actually won't be there, unfortunately, but I plan to sit down and just learn a bit myself, because I want to, I know a different way of voting. I know numerous different ways, so I want to understand what are options to.
Yeah, for anyone who has an intellectual curiosity about these systems, boy, there is a lot of information out there. Fairvote.org is probably, I think, the gold standard in terms of election sites. It's one word, fairvote.org. Has information on you name it. I mean, cumulative voting, ranked choice, all the hybrids, where they're used, election, kind of history about, how they've worked in certain jurisdictions, including Oakland, including Berkeley, including San Leandro. And there's other websites too. That Fairvote, I think, is the one that most voting rights experts tend to look to first.
Which method is this particular gentleman proposing?
I don't
Ranked
think
choice,
he is
yeah, he's a
proposing.
ranked choice
Yeah.
advocate.
I think we need to move on, just because we will have, either people can on their own go listen to it, or
Yeah.
we'll have something in writing if that makes sense.
I'll
when we get
send
to
something
that.
to Yvonne so that everybody knows where it is and when.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the chair if we could, this is interesting, and this will come in due time, and thanks, Ren, for putting it together, but just because the way we work, I'd like to get to the compensation issue now, so we could hopefully get resolution on that, and then if we do get resolution, then perhaps we can look forward. If that's okay with you?
I think we have one more thing for the city attorney.
No, just take a second. So one of you asked for a list of the definitions of what a protected class is. And all of those classes are covered in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Mary Elizabeth is a civil rights attorney, so if I say something wrong, please let me know. But generally, we're talking about all the protected classes as designated by federal law. That is race, color, religion, national origin, age, 40 and over, sex, pregnancy, citizenship, and family status. I think disability status, veteran status, genetic information. I think that covers pretty much all of it. So it's a pretty wide swath of protected classes under.
But actually, Title VII was only 5, and then I think California has since added a number, if I'm not mistaken. But
If that's the correct list, yes, it's a much more.
yeah.
In the voting rights context, it's usually thought of as minorities, but it can be a much broader concept.
So.
Okay. The next topic is the committee discussion for the council compensation. So I just wanted to kind of touch base with where we're at and the fact that if we're going to get a recommendation in front of the council for their consideration to put on the ballot, we have like 9 to 10 meetings left, that's it. And so we need to start making some decisions around compensation, at least this one topic, because I think it's pretty much something that we can do fairly quickly. The one thing I want to just point out is none of us are comp experts. We don't want to overcomplicate this and take data analysis to the extreme, because I think it's an important issue, but it's also something we can look at fairly quickly just on looking at averages and triangulating a couple of ways of looking at something. In the last meetings, I know we started going down a bunch of different roads, so I want to just reread what the council direction was to us. It said, review the appropriate level of compensation for the city council members and the method of determining such compensation both now and in future years. That's the scope. So if we start going somewhere else, I'm going to say, sorry, that's out of scope, and I want to talk about that. Because if we just can't keep going down all these different roads. So the first thing I want to do as a team is to think about a simple methodology to use that's going to determine the appropriate pay. It has to be simple because this is going to go in front of ordinary citizens like ourselves that we're going to have to defend, and it's going to have to be reasonable. So if we go out and we say, oh, we decided, X amount of dollars, and we just kind of pulled it out of the air, and it's a 58% increase, no citizen is going to vote that in, I can guarantee you. So I just want you guys to be cognizant of percentage increase, also what they've been increased in the past, and then a way to look at a methodology that seems fair. Now, I have crunched some numbers. I know other people have crunched numbers. I already got Brian's average, which, by the way, my numbers pretty much correlate to your number in a range, right? So there's a range that we can talk about, and then from there make even further discussions around. So I wanted to kind of open it up and first see if everyone's okay with, let's stick with the scope, and let's try to make some progress tonight on a methodology. Sound good? Okay. So, Jose.
First question. Why do we have, and maybe this is, I don't know if this is a really important question, but why is the mayor's salary different than the council member's salary when they are both part-time? Is there an expectation that the mayor is putting more hours than our council members? Has that historically been accurate? And does the difference in compensation reflect that? Just a question.
The initial city charter had the mayor paid more than the city council members, so that was simply mimicked when the charter was reviewed back in 2000. Additionally, the mayor does have significantly more work. They're going to ribbon cuttings as a spokesperson on behalf of the city council. In fact, the city charter itself gives the mayor some limited but additional latitude with regards to how they engage also in the process of policy. So it's expected that the mayor's role will take significantly more time than that of a city council member.
And does the delta reflect that? In other words, if their compensation was 50% more than the council members, then they're pretty much doing 50% more work? Just roughly, this is on order of magnitude.
It depends on the council member. It would be a very difficult statement to make one way or another.
Tino.
Can I speak to that? When I looked at this, and again, I have some numbers that I've looked at that I think are appropriate. I think when you go to the precedent, not the precedent, but, well, the precedent, we said the mayor makes more, but in other cities, I think you'll also find that the mayor makes more because of their responsibilities. But what I want to try and focus on is not so much how much time one person spends, and the reason being is, not that it's not important, because it is important, and we want to compensate fairly, so I totally get that. But it's impossible for anybody to be able to explain the day in the life of a council member or a mayor. I think that you could say, what's a typical day? But when you look at, what's on the docket and what's coming up and so on and so forth, that can go from not having a whole lot on the agenda. So maybe you have 2 weeks of where your packet was very small to having a substantial packet that is 3 or 4 or 5 times bigger. Perhaps Jody knows better than I do, that there's going to be times when you're going to put in exponentially more work until the issue is resolved. And then you may, so very much to me is very dynamic, but it has peaks and valleys. And I think to try and quantify the amount of work somebody's doing is going to be really hard for all of us because, we just don't go by salary, which is 40 hours, 2,080 hours, a year, and then we calculate from there. It really is part-time, but in some cases it's full-time. In some cases it could be arguably less than part-time. So I want to do the same thing you want to, which is compensate fairly, but I think if we get into that discussion, it's going to be really difficult to quantify and explain to the public if we use that methodology. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. Okay, so I looked at both the compensation by charter, how many people were on the city council, the size of the city council. I'm just talking city council right now. And I looked at the ones that were closest in population that were in the Silicon Valley. Outside Silicon Valley, I don't know that that makes sense, but that was just one way I looked at it. When I came up with an average, just on those cities, it was 1,344 was the average. For just looking at the city council, just the council members. Of charter cities, 7 or more with similar populations in the Silicon Valley. And there weren't many that I compared them to.
What was that number again?
1344,
That's the monthly?
yes, monthly. So when I went back and looked at what Brian provided us, his was close. It was 13 something, averaging all the cities with the same population. So that made me feel comfortable that the number was in the ballpark. But then when I looked at the general fund budget, although I see there was a change made with an
Yeah,
enterprise
there
fund.
was one
budget.
error on the enterprise fund which we corrected.
So the Santa Clara enterprise fund budget is 450,000?
Million.
A million compared, how come it's so much higher?
Because of the electrical utility.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, my God, it looks like.
Yeah,
an
that's
error.
not an error. That is a correct number.
Okay, so that would be really hard to compare. Well, I did it before without the electric in it. I'm assuming that's what happened. There was no electric put in it before when it had a general fund.
No, it was actually the salary of the mayor that was incorrect on the
Yeah, we flipped Santa
Yeah.
Clara and Sunnyvale in the first iteration of it, the one that we sent out via email.
So how much is Santa Clara?
But for the mayor on the first.
1425?
Santa Clara for council is 10,263.
Correct, and the mayor is 17,105.
You're talking about the top.
Okay, well, I'll have to review those numbers. I didn't get a chance. I did it based on the information.
We calculated the ratios as requested by a couple of you. I don't know how helpful those are, but
Yeah. I don't even know what that would tell us, you know.
So Beverly, I took the same exact numbers that Ren or provided or that they provided, and I just put it in Excel, which is what Howard is asking for. And I have here the printout of the Excel. It's just basically the numbers that Ren provided. There's no
So,
change
are
to
the
it.
numbers wrong? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
one
I used
incorrect
the
number
adjusted
from what
ones.
we, on the budget ratio sheet, Santa Clara and Sunnyvale were flipped. So it should read that the annual salary mayor is 17,105 and council is 10,263.
So I'm sorry, what was that again?
It's right on.
It's correct on the paper that
On the printout, it should be correct.
Beverly, would you allow me to pass the paper out? It's just basically a printout of the Excel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just a question, and Rod, maybe you know this. Does Sunnyvale, they have a city manager, obviously,
Correct.
right? And it's full-time,
No. The city manager is full-time, the council members are not.
all right? And what does that city manager earn in comparison to ours?
That I don't know. The city managers across Silicon Valley tend to be fairly well paid. They're solidly, low six-figure salaries.
So my
200
understanding
plus.
is city council is, like, I know that now, they go to ribbon cutting, but the mayor does. But on a general sense, they're just rubber stamping things, or are they doing more than that? The city.
I don't know that I would say that rubber stamping is anything that they do. But this
You get
is
where
a
I'm-
council manager form of government. And in this case, this came out of the reform movement in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where reformers across California and the nation said, we think that there is a bona fide professional skill that's necessary to run cities, and that there was no Republican or Democrat way to fill a pothole. So they wanted, and that was the advent of what we think of as modern professional civil service. And that's when there was a big transition from many other forms of government to primarily for small cities, a council manager form of government, where the city councils became what you would think of as more of a board of directors, and the city manager became the CEO. So the council members were supposed to be members of the public who would provide guidance with regards to policy, and the city manager would then go and implement that.
Okay.
And so that's what you find yourself with as a general structure in Santa Clara and also across Silicon Valley. Every city in Santa Clara County, but the city of San Jose, has this council manager form of government. And in fact, our charter actually says it's a council manager form of government in the definitions. So that's part of what you're working with regards to the professional nature of a council member or not, as it was anticipated, at least by the charter. The city of Santa Clara, of course, by virtue of how large its enterprise fund is and how large its general fund is and all the rest of that, it does require a fairly significant skill set and a fairly significant amount of work, in that the size of budgets in general determines the number of agenda items that you're going to consider during each year and process, because you have to have an agenda item to go along with spending money. And it wouldn't necessarily be a perfect curve with regards to the amount of money, because a lot of these things that the electrical utility is spending are big contracts. So it's not as if it's the same scale as the general fund would be, but it still is something to consider.
So, and what do you class as civil service? What does that mean to you? Because I'd like to, I have an opinion on it, but I want to know what it means here. Does that mean service?
I don't know what the legal definition is. I know that with regards to the way the reformers meant it, it was simply people who are professionally paid to gain, skill set and be part of the official manager side of that government equation.
Okay.
Would you allow me just to explain what the different columns are?
Yes, please.
Okay, so, right, so everything that's on the left of the solid line that goes up and down is exactly what was in the paper that was provided to us, right? It's just the raw numbers. And then the first one to the right of that, it says population divided by council members. So just some cities have more council members than others. So I just took the population and I divided it by the number of council members. I'm gonna skip the next one for a minute, the next two. The next, the fourth one, which is general fund divided by population, it's basically, I'm taking the general fund, the enterprise one, because Santa Clara was so out of line with everything else, I didn't think it would be anything relevant for us. So I used the general fund and I divided by the population. In other words, each citizen contributed that amount to the general fund, or that's how much the general fund was, representative of each citizen. The other numbers are just comparables. They don't really mean anything on their own. It's just, for example, when I look at the last column, which says council member salary divided by, it's divided by that ratio. It's basically, you can see that Santa Clara at 6.71 pays its council members less than San Mateo at 7.66, based on the number of people, relative to the salary of that, the number of people that each council member, so quote unquote, represents by the salary that they make, okay, or the compensation that they make. So it's just a relative number. It means nothing on its own. So when you look at those numbers, the ones that really stand out, if you want to look at which cities are comparable in size to us, is you look at how many people does each council member quote unquote represent, and you can see that Santa Clara is 17,277, and Redwood City and Mountain View have the two closest numbers to that. The other thing which you look at is, again, based on the size of our general fund and the number of people in the city, the 1530 for Santa Clara. Really the closest one to that is Mountain View, and the other ones are a little bit further away. So what I did was I just took Mountain View and Redwood City based on those two alone, and I just copy pasted that on the second half of the paper. So it's just a copy paste. So you can just focus on those three cities. And then what you can see by just focusing on those three cities is that Santa Clara, if you look at the way right, it says 11.18. We pay our mayor relatively more than Mountain View and Redwood City, but we pay our council members relatively less. And that's basically just what it's looking at. And if I wanted, so what I said was, what would it take for us to just pay our mayor and council members the average of those three cities? Those are the numbers that you see at the bottom. But it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, and I totally agree with what Beverly said in the beginning, which is, let's not try to make a complicated mathematical formula. I'm just trying to look at comparables between like cities, that's all.
So it looks like the mayor, though, would be, if I'm reading this right, it looks like the mayor would actually take a decrease in pay.
If you were to match it to the average, that may not be the right thing to do. I'm just,
okay.
Okay, Jeannie.
I have two questions. Is the mayor of Mountain View and Redwood City, are they appointed, like rotating, or are they elected? And my second question is, what is the difference then between, I guess, I want to make sure I'm clear on the general fund and the enterprise fund. Could you clarify those two?
I can tell you that the mayor of Sunnyvale is rotational. I don't know about the mayor of Redwood City. I'll share with you that the city of Santa Clara and the city of Sunnyvale do have similar election systems, and that we currently elect people at large by seat. We're the only two cities in the state that currently have that system. They have
I've
it
been
about the same
thinking
time.
they pay their mayor less than we do. I was wondering if it's just because maybe it's a rotated office as opposed to an elected office. And then what is the difference between the general fund and the enterprise fund?
Enterprise fund is self-supporting. In
Okay.
other words, the electrical utility, perfect example. You all get monthly utility bills, and that goes into, I mean, that fund exists strictly through fees and charges that are paid by residents, and not the general fund.
And I
what's
don't
the
know if
general
this is a
fund?
good time. I do have a comment though. I think we're kind of missing the boat only looking at like populations and like numbers. Because when you look at, we are dealing with a 451 million enterprise budget and a much larger general fund budget. I think our people are having to do more. I think that's a bigger job. I think they're overseeing a whole lot more with the stadium and the electric and those kinds of things. So I think that definitely needs to be part of what we look at for these people. And I don't know if this is out of turn either, but having had 2 family members involved, there's very few valleys and there's a lot more peaks. I mean, they work very hard. Even at their second job, their regular job, they spend hours and hours preparing, visiting, talking to people, reading, preparing. There's very few downtimes, in my opinion, I've seen that close in person. I just didn't give that input.
So I think that's a comment we need to think about, and I think if we can at least baseline something and then talk about if it's more or less, just to
Well, I'm
start.
just saying, I think when we're just looking at populations, we're really missing the boat for our city council.
But you can add to that. You can look at like
I think
and say
that's-
average.
I don't
and-
even know if that's, quote, a good starting point. I think it may be part of the equation. But I think that the other things really need to be taken into account. Because I know just overseeing that stadium, the stadium authority, is something no one else in any of these cities is asked to do.
And
Not
that
even-
is an enterprise fund, the stadium is.
Not even San Francisco anymore. So I'm just saying, that's a huge thing.
So when you say enterprise fund, that's self.
There's really 4 major enterprise funds in the city: the electrical utility, the water utility, the sewer utility, and the stadium. They're in theory meant to be self-supporting by the revenue generated by the activities that the fund carries out. And someone asked about the general fund is everything else. It's like your bank account at home. You pay all your bills out of the general fund. You pay employee costs out of the general fund.
So the
Rod and I are
enterprise-
paid out of the general fund, as Diana and Yvonne.
So the enterprise fund is not cumulative of the general fund plus the other 4 things that you
No,
mentioned? It's
no.
just on its own?
Sorry, was
They're
the
booked
list-
separately and handled separately.
Brian.
Yeah, I think taking up on your point, if we keep doing these things, we'll eventually arrive at a number that we can agree on. That's why all these things are good. So I did another thing. What I did was this is what I did. I took 8 cities that I could find. Many of these cities, these are Bakersfield, Fremont, Tracy, Mountain View, and their general fund. So Santa Clara's is about 185 million. So I have 8 cities with general funds around that number and maybe larger. And then what I did was I took the average, I took this council salary that they pay those people, and I averaged it out. And I come up with a number of 1544. This is 8 cities that have a general fund that is equal or greater than what Santa Clara has. I'm not saying this is the right number, but what I am saying is that while I agree with you, Jeannie, that it's a lot, we still have to have something that passes the voters.
Right.
And we still have to have something that's palatable for them. So in going back to what the chairperson said at the beginning, even though it's difficult to quantify what Hossam did and what I'm trying to do and what anybody else here can do, is to come up with something that we say we can live with this number because this is all the cities or a number of cities that are equal to, for example, in this case, and I'll pass this out. You can just pass this out.
So, Hossam, what's your number? Is it this 1467?
Where? Sorry.
Well, that's what I'm trying to work out. Where is your number?
The one,
No, no.
Look at the very bottom.
The very bottom is
That's the
saying
increase.
what you would adjust it to based strictly on Mountain View, Redwood, and Santa Clara.
On an annual basis.
On
On an annual basis. So, and then it's looking at it from two different ways. One, which is normalizing it based on the number of citizens per council member, and then the other way is normalizing it based on the general fund number. So again, it's not a right or wrong, it's just a different way of looking at the
The
same
number
number.
we come up with is very similar. We're around the number.
I don't know if it's similar, because if you're saying 1,500 a month, 1,500 a month is what you were saying?
Yeah, we're coming up.
That would be about,
1544 is what.
that would be about how much per year? That would be
15, it would be,
18,000.
18,000.
18,000, so I'm saying almost 11,000, so it's a little bit off.
Can you quickly put that into monthly? I want to stay
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
one or the other, because it's too confusing
Yeah.
if we're doing annual
The
versus
paper that I
monthly.
have is monthly.
That's why I want to stick
Okay.
to monthly. I think
Sure.
it's easy, just divide it by 12. Okay,
So,
Trevor, I'm also, I've had my.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead. Go
Okay.
for it.
So, as the elected official in the room, there's a lot more that goes into it than just the meetings. So if you're thinking it's just like the time to read the packet, there's so much more. And although the population size definitely has something to do with that, because you might have more meetings with people, I think that the size of the budget is a lot more relevant, because when you have more of these, the stadium, the electrical, I think all those probably take up a whole nother set of time of documents that you have to read and things that you have to learn about and be able to respond on. So it's the same number of people, but we're adding a whole nother level of complexity in Santa Clara that our other cities around us don't have. And that's a huge time commitment, I think, for that. Go ahead.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, Jody, but this is what we have city staff for. These are the ones that handle a lot of the nuts and bolts of this. This is what a manager council type of government is. And I think Rod just said that, so I won't reiterate all of it.
I think one other perspective we should look at is not only how much do we want to give them. Right now, we're paying $78,683 for the entire council. How much do we want to take out of the fund to pay for them all, for example? Like, this would come out of the reserves,
Well, it could be part of the general fund.
right? So I think we should look at the total number we want to spend on the council, maybe divide from there. How much do we want to spend on council?
I think the scope.
How much can we afford?
I think the scope, though, was just to come up with a recommendation from the council. So even though affordability is kind of the city's problem.
No, it should be our problem.
Well, but the voters won't vote it in if they will ask how we came up with that conclusion, and trust me.
Well, I mean, times are good right now. We
Right.
actually, we're running a surplus. We have a large fund balance. Reserves are growing. But, in recessionary times, funding something like that would have to come out of reserves.
Tino is next.
Thank you. So I'm gonna try and bring this back to reality, because we're going off on these really in-depth, if we look at this, we multiply it by this, we look at the stadium, we look at the electric, we look at the sewer, we look at how much they work and read their packet, and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, we have to sell the taxpayer. And that's what it comes down to. We can sit here and analyze to death, and I'll go, we are brilliant. And guess what? If we take a $16,000 a year, that's a 63% increase. Okay? So, I fundamentally agree with Jeannie, I fundamentally agree with Jody, that our council people work their butt off. I don't think there's anybody in this room that doubts that. So, let's just push that aside. They work their butts off. But the truth of the matter is, what can we sell the public? Can we sell them on a 63% increase to be at the 50th percentile? And the answer is no. So the question really becomes, what can we sell the public? Can we sell a 20% increase? Can we sell a 30% increase? That's really the discussion we have. Because at the end of the day, all of us would like to give them more, then we're gonna be able to sell. So my thing is, if you go at a 25 to 35% increase based on the stadium and everything else, I think people can stomach that. I don't think they can stomach above 35%. Because again, I hate to say this, but if we're gonna get real, the trust in the council right now is not great. And so there's a lot of skepticism out there with the council, not that it's fair, but what can we sell to the general public? Like, I think, Mario mentioned, let's just double it. Well, if we double it, we have to tell them we're gonna give them a 100% increase. That's not gonna work in a conservative city. It's just not. So I'd like to change the discussion as to when everybody's done, what do we think we can sell, and what does that number come out to? Because at the end of the day, we have to explain it and put it on the ballot.
Exactly. That's what I started with in trying to frame this whole thing. Okay, now we had these guys first. So let me go with Steve and then Howard.
Yeah, I remember a couple of sessions ago, you gave us a link to a site that had recommendations for every city in the state based on the type of government they had. And I remember it had for council members 20,000 as the target, which surprised me. It meant we were only at 50%. So
We're definitely underpaid. That's
well, definitely
no doubt.
underpaid. And and to I think Tino's remarks, we don't have to give it to them or propose to be at one time. It can be over a 3-year period and all of that.
Exactly.
Plus, the other thing I'm thinking is that we shouldn't come up with one number. What we provide to the city council is a range.
Well, that's what I first started with, is
Yeah.
I had a range, and if other people triangulated into the range, then it would help make sense of the data.
Right.
But we have a million different ways of looking at it, clearly. So I do agree that if we're gonna do something that's in over 25%, it has to be over years, because I don't think that the citizens would pass that either. So let me get Howard's opinion, then we'll go over to Mario, and then we'll go over to Brian. Howard.
I think, I agree that, I said to one of the council members recently that if they were getting paid a quarter an hour, they'd be rich. They'd spend a lot of time on it. But anybody that manage people and giving out performance reviews or raises, whatever, there's nothing you like more than giving somebody a raise. But I don't, there's another option here, because one of the things is not just the salary, but how it's determined. Looking at the sheet that were passed out at the charter cities, twice as many does not have the salary set outside of the charter. It's set by some review committee or some other way. Only a third of them actually have the amount in the charter. And so I think that we ought to be considering not just the idea that how much are we going to give them. The question is, who should be setting that? Is it us that we should be, here's how much you get? Or should we establish some kind of a commission? There's our salary setting commission exists already, and we can have them do it. So it's not hard and fast in the charter, because that's
Right.
Like I say, looking at the charters, 2/3 of them is not set in a charter.
So you made that point last meeting, and I think what would be good is we still come up with a recommendation of what they should be increased, which is what we were asked to do. And then the third part where it says if there's any changes to the charter, maybe that becomes one of the recommended changes based on a benchmark.
But as you read the instructions, is not just how much, but it's like how to establish it, and how to establish it would be to have it established by a commission rather than a committee.
Method of determining both now and in the future.
Yeah, and the best way to do that, in my opinion.
But does that involve changing our charter? I just clarified.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, well, that's what we are. We're Charter Review Committee. That's what we do.
Take that out.
And so, so I think that's certainly with not only the scope of our authority to recommend this, but it's actually in line with what they've suggested. Come up with something, and having this thing that, this is the Constitution, and you have somebody's salary in the Constitution. I mean, I'm sorry, whoever started this, that didn't make sense. And like I say, 2/3 of the charter city have already decided that's not a good idea. Have it set outside of the charter. And it can go up and down depending on, if times are really bad, they can get a cut in pay. Anyway, that's my suggestion.
Okay, Mario?
Okay, one of the things you're talking about sale. This is the way you're going to sell the increase. They were underpaid. the city council has been underpaid all these years. So any increase, even if you double it, or if you go 30%, 40%, 50%, it's gonna be not even bringing it close to what the minimum wage is, we're $11 an hour right now. It's not gonna even come close to it. On one hand, you're saying that they're working more than 8 hours a day, or putting more time, like having 2 jobs, 2 full-time jobs. So at one hand, you're saying they're not worth this much, and the other hand says, no, they're worth a lot more. So in reality, this is how you would sell it, the proposed pay increases, by saying that, coming in from the beginning, saying, our city council has been underpaid all these years, and this is what they are doing, this is the extra jobs that they're trying to get, they're being levied on. So this is the way we're gonna be doing it. This is what we feel a 30 or 40% pay increase will come in, that will put it in comparison to cities of the same size. The voters are not that stupid, and they're not like what? Most of the people that live in the city making over $100,000 to $150,000 a year to be able to live in the city. So they know what it's worth, their time is worth.
So I would just comment, and at least this piece of information I got, which shows they had a starting pay in 2010, and then after that, all they've gotten have been cost of living. So you can make an argument that they haven't had a quote increase. However, this cost of living increases isn't much different than in the private sector.
And I know, and that's, well, being in business, I know exactly, I want to keep my cost of living lower than what it in reality is for our area. And this is the way that you usually functions as well. Instead of giving everyone has to do cost of living, which actually, compared to other wages in the area, this doesn't make any sense.
So I want to ask staff too, their opinion.
No, actually, I was simply to clarify this. Their starting pay was actually set at, I think it was $600 and $1,000 way back in 2000 when they did those reviews. We simply went back 5 years to give you a general sense of what had happened over the past 5 years. If the committee would like additional information, we can ask the finance department to go back further than that and give you the full array of what their increases were over that entire 16-year period at this point. So I didn't want to say, start off as saying as if that was they were starting paid and that was something that came out of a charter review committee or something like that. That just happened to be what it was that year when they showed up.
What would be interesting to me would be when it was started and the first time it went to vote, what the percentage increase was that got passed.
It went from 250 to 250 to 500 or 600. I think it was 600 for the council. And I don't know what it did for the mayor.
But it has been on the ballot multiple times and failed.
It's been on the ballot like 5 times.
And that's my point.
Like that.
It's been on the ballot 5 times. So to Mario's point, I agree with Mario's saying. What I'm not clear is how much space in whatever, when we put this on the ballot, okay, how much room are we going to, because Mario took 3 minutes to explain the methodology behind all of this, okay? Are we going to be able to go in depth to a point where we're going to be able to justify where they're at today, percentage-wise, where we wanted to get them, why they're underpaid, blah, 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 blah. Because if you're saying that we're going to send out like the ballot and we're going to have 2 full pages to explain it, okay, I could see that. But if you're going to put it on a ballot and most people don't read that, they just go, oh.
They're giving themselves more money.
Okay?
Well, the ballot question would be, shall the compensation for Santa Clara City Council members be raised to X amount?
Okay,
So then all the background information would be in the arguments, right?
So my thing is, you would have the background argument, okay? But it's failed 5 times for a reason. And I would imagine it's because people don't take the time to really invest and really read those things as they should, as I do. So when they get there, they make a snap decision. Sometimes people vote with the first name, whatever the first name is, because they don't even know who is running for an attorney general or whatever. They just pick the first because they don't know. So my thing is, I would like to be able to sell it to where we have a fair chance of giving them something that can be approved that people can stomach in the real world.
So Steve had his hand up first, then Mary, and then we'll go over here to Jeannie and Brian.
No, Kathy.
Oh, Kathy, sorry.
He's Brian.
Very, very briefly, if you look at the 2000, when they raised the council's salary, and then it added CPI, I was not there, but I'm guessing the conversation was very similar to this, saying, the council is grossly underpaid, let's give them a raise, and let's put something in there, like CPI, that will maybe boost them up someday to where they ought to be. So maybe we should take a look at not just a flat increase, but is there another accelerator that we could look at tied to employee compensation or something like that?
You could do
That
the
would be
cost of
better
living
than
adjustment.
CPI is my first thought. The second thought is, I would just encourage you not to discount the work with the enterprise funds. I believe the enterprise funds is what makes Santa Clara different. It is truly our golden goose. That's what has given us financial stability over many, many years. So there's work that goes into that. Staff does most of it, but council still reviews and approves and argues and does that. So I don't want to just discount the enterprise funds.
Right, and I agree. Mary?
I'm just wondering if some of this discussion is counseling in favor of Howard's idea that we should consider taking this out of the charter. Because if it keeps failing at the ballot box, perhaps that counsels in favor of somebody outside of the general electorate should decide whether or not the city council gets a raise. And the way that the general electorate would then be involved in the process is through the way that they're involved in all of the other ways the city council makes ordinances and makes decisions, rather than it being in the charter.
We can't take, that's not the scope of this, of what they've asked us to do, to take something out. Our job, no, it's not to take this out, read the thing, it's not to take this thing out of the charter.
It could be.
It could be, yeah, but I'm just saying that's not the scope. But I want to ask the city attorney something. Let me have the floor for a second. When you do compensation, you look at those cities, right? That's that thing that I gave you. That's how cities manage their finances. They go to that thing across the board, and you try your best to take exact cities, and you do the compensation. Am I not correct?
Well, that's, the city manager can correct me, but oftentimes in labor negotiations, those kinds of comparisons are
All right,
used.
so one more thing. So I want to ask another question. As this committee, if we say, let's say we come up with some wording, is the city council going to take our rate wording and put it on the ballot, say, or will they reword what we're going to say so that it's more palatable to the voters?
Well, that's up to them.
But will they do that? I mean, that's my question. Do you know?
I don't know that was their intention, but I do want to clarify one thing. I mean, changing the methodology of council and mayor compensation, and if you choose to think through a salary setting commission procedure, that is the methodology for setting. That actually would be embedded in the charter, as it is in many jurisdictions.
Right.
And then the salary setting commission grapples with these benchmarks like you all are doing now.
And then they don't have to take it to a vote. They decide.
Well, that's.
Well, so how would they be appointed?
That's
Well, we would discuss how we would want to appoint them. So maybe they are elected members of the public. I don't know. I mean, it's just there's a bunch of ways
sometimes they
to
are,
do it.
sometimes they're appointed. That's all questions that you can flesh out.
I have a clarification question. If we were to decide to do that and take it out of the charter, does that have to go in front of the voters?
Yeah.
So I think we're kind of entering a whole different realm when
That's
we
my
start
point.
looking at that.
Simplifying things.
I still say that if we come up with a number and do what the chairperson said, which is to triangulate a number that's based on what Hassan did, what I did, what you've done, and we can come up with a number and word it in a way that can explain the things that Mario said, where based on what we see in this community and everything else, that this is where we think it should be, it will work.
Taking into consideration the enterprise fund, which
Absolutely.
I think you could just say the triangulated average becomes this because of perhaps they do more of the work because of this enterprise part, then we bump it up by whatever. I mean, just some kind of methodology. We've got to come to a decision on that. Kathy?
Yeah, what I was going to suggest, or just throw it out, something, and Jody will be familiar with this, when the school district has thought about doing a parcel tax, they've set aside, X amount of dollars and had somebody do a survey, do a call around and ask people, here are 3 numbers. Which do you feel more, and what do you feel comfortable with? What kind of parcel tax would you feel comfortable with paying? And so it gives the voters the opportunity to say, yes, this is what I like, so that you have transparency. And going back to what Tina was saying before about, just, the opinion of the community right now, I mean, it's giving them the opportunity to have a say in what they think their council is worth.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Really quick. How many of you here, fellow members, have asked their neighbors, how much do the city council make or the mayor make? Anybody? No. I have. Especially at the senior center and so on. People say, well, maybe $2,000-3,000. That's what the numbers are throwing up. If they knew it was 800, and when you tell them it's 800, they go, what? They just can't believe it. So that's one of the things that you have to take in consideration. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends in the city. Says, how much do you think the mayor's making? How much do you think a city council will make? And see what they get. That's how you get an opinion what people will believe and will vote for too.
But the last 5 times it was on the ballot, it failed.
Yeah,
So as far as I'm concerned, whether my neighbor feels, well, how much do they make, how much do they not make, so on and so, this is great if you have the time to go do this poll. We've got to put this on a ballot. They've got to figure out to put it on a ballot and sell it on a ballot. There's not going to be small group sessions to explain all this. It's going to be on a ballot, and the average Joe's not going to read it, number one. And the second thing is, when we start getting into methodologies, I promise you, it's starting to sound like my graduate course in statistics.
Exactly.
And the average person is not going to go, well, the enterprise fund is $463 million, and compared to, Milpitas is $132 million, and therefore they must work. It doesn't, I mean, I agree with what Steve's saying, that we should factor that into the number we give them. But the general population is not going to understand. We had to ask clarification from a city attorney. What's the average guy, your neighbor, going to say when you say, well, the enterprise fund's $462 million in Santa Clara? They're going to go, what the hell is the enterprise fund?
Like we do.
That's exactly right. Well, you have to come
I had to write it down.
You can go contact 120,000 people and let them know what the enterprise fund is, because they're not going to know.
Can I add to that? I think your average person is going to say, which is what I would say, is somebody who's in office like this does it for service. Why did they do it to start with, right? They didn't do it for compensation. I'm sorry. Ask any politician, that will be the, I'm doing this for service because I love my country, I love my people, I love my city. They don't do it because they get $1 value, right? Now, they might get a book out of it at the end. And they might make money out of their wives for that. But that's a different thing. We do it for service. We're doing this for service. I don't see anybody giving me money for this. Jeannie.
Well, I think 2 things. I think we're really selling the average voter short. People aren't stupid. I think they do read more than we think, at least I would hope. And I don't see with an explanation of what that fund does, people would understand that they're a stadium authority and they're overseeing all our utilities. Give people some credit. That's not hard to figure out, in my opinion. And secondly, yes, people do it for service, but there is a point where we have to be fair and equitable to what these people are doing for us. I think that we owe them something as their constituents.
So, Hussein.
Okay, I have a couple things. First one is, this kind of debate that we're having here is all intelligent, citizens and educated citizens, and we can't even come to an agreement.
Right.
So I really think that it's in the best interest that we focus on establishing a commission that determines council salaries, that doesn't get perceived as the council members are appointing people to the commission that are their buddies that are going to raise the salaries for them, okay? That we think of a way that we can sell the idea to voters to say these are neutral people, these are regular citizens, and times are tough, they can adjust it down. Times are well, and they're doing a great job, they can adjust it up. And then you can have smart people like Brian and yourself who know how to crunch numbers and come up with a number, and they will have the authority in this new charter provision that we write to set it without voter approval, based on an analytical, very smart way of doing it and looking at all the different funds and blah, blah, blah.
If it gets passed.
If it gets passed. So that's my first thought. The second thought that I have is, which I don't think anybody's discussed yet, is the reason that we want to give them more money is because they put so much time and effort into this. Have we thought about maybe putting in the charter that each council member has the ability to identify or hire somebody for pay to be their assistant. In other words, when they get a packet that has 500 pages that they have to read in the span of 3 days, can they have somebody that helps them read through, that they maybe get to pick or something like that? In other words, you offload some of the burden from them so that they can get a little bit of help. And then obviously when that council member changes, or somebody else gets elected in, then obviously that assistant, so to speak, but that assistant would be specific to a certain council member.
But then you would talk about 7 council members at an assistant's salary of $80,000 a year. Who's
Well, I don't know what the assistant's salary would be.
Well, I mean, it would.
Yeah.
We wouldn't find somebody for $10 an hour.
No, but it would be somebody who the council member would say, look, you're my buddy. I know you and I have similar viewpoints on things. Would you like to help me? Type of a thing. And yeah, they would get maybe the same kind of compensation as a council member, which is peanuts. But
That's what your spouse is for.
Okay, so I wanna take, Ahmed, please.
I just had a quick question. You said it was on the ballot 5 times. It failed. When was that?
No, I didn't fail all 5 times. In fact, it passed most recently. In 2000, they gave the council an increase from $250 to $600. So that was a more than 100% increase.
But in 1986, what failed was, in 1986, a proposal to $1,000 a month for the council members and $1,800 for the mayor in 1986. So the numbers we're looking at today, by comparison, are pretty small. But they also had a competing measure the same year on compensation. They both failed, and I think that was putting in competing measures seemed kind of weird.
So we have a much different electorate today in 2000.
Yeah.
Well, it's different, the numbers, I mean, $1,000 in 86 was a lot,
I'm talking about the electorate numbers.
So since there's these opinions about whether to keep it in the charter or not in the charter, I want to just go around the room and I want your opinions. You want it in the charter or out of the charter, just to get a kind of feel for where people's heads are.
Sorry, when you say in the charter, out of the charter, you mean a specific value or?
Specifically, keeping it in the scope that how I read it is basically, what is the method and how do we want, what recommendation do we have in terms of appropriate level for compensation? So we either do that within the charter like it is today. I want to know if that's your opinion as how we should look at that, or take it completely out of the charter and basically we're going to start from scratch.
I'm sorry, but all of the suggestions, even Howard's, it's still in the charter.
Yeah, but the dollar amount isn't.
But the dollar amount is,
That's what we're
it's
talking about.
basically
No, that's in
putting.
the charter. The dollar amount's in
Well,
there.
but my proposal is to take the dollar amount out.
But
Yes.
right, put in a committee then.
Yes.
to-
Yeah,
to-
have
to
some
think
other
that.
way to
I want to
set.
know people's opinion
There's
about that.
there's 3 different ways that cities handle this. One is to designate a number like we do. 2 is to identify a process like a salary setting commission that without identifying a number. 3 is just leaving it to the council to set by resolution.
By ordinance.
No, by resolution.
Who's the third one?
The council.
Allowing the council to set their own salary by resolution. It could be by ordinance. I don't know if it matters.
Okay, so I want to go around, set in the charter as it is today, or a salary commission that's set.
I think the long-term solution is the commission, if we don't want to keep coming back and doing this. And it's costly to put stuff on the ballot, remember that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question now, Commissioner. If you put that on the charter as a commission, does that specify a number, and is that automatically part? I don't know where I'm going.
You would describe in the charter how you select that commission and how
come
they
up with a
determine their
number.
numbers.
They come up with a number,
Yes.
and then the city has to do that no matter what.
Well, I mean, it
the residents
doesn't
have
even
no
need to
say.
be that elaborate. You don't necessarily have to put a methodology in the charter.
Okay.
That's right.
It's
just like a committee.
Most jurisdictions that use a salary setting commission just say salaries are set by a commission. That's it.
No, then it doesn't.
Okay.
But the council still has to vote on that.
Yes, I mean, there's different ways.
Council
We can
votes,
come back with,
not the residents.
we can come back with more information as to how jurisdictions implement a salary setting commission. We haven't brought that information to you. We can certainly do that.
I believe that's what San Jose does.
That is correct.
Okay, so you said,
San Jose does the
Commission.
commission.
Yes.
And then they have to vote on
so Tina, what's your opinion?
You know, Howard kind of changed my mind. I would actually take it out of the charter because I think the long-term solution is to have an unbiased group be able to provide some sort of a number that the council then has to struggle with. I mean, whether they're going to approve it or not.
Okay, Steve?
Commission.
Okay,
Commission.
okay. Let me guess. Okay, Stephen?
Commission. Commission.
I say keep it within the charter. I think that was more of our direction that we were told, and I think, I guess it's old school, but I still think keeping it.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, we're the people who work on the council are beholden to the taxpayers. And we are the taxpayers. And so it's up to us to decide. If 17 members can't decide what a compensation can be, why would we pass it on to a commission? So I say keep it in the charter, and we can come up with a number, just what's existing there. But the council,
Yes or no?
this council, I say no, absolutely. I want to keep it in the charter.
Thank you. Kathy?
Commission.
Okay.
There's two arguments and they're both very valid. So for the moment, I should say keep it in the charter.
Okay. Me as well. Charter. No charter also.
Commission.
Commission, okay.
Commission.
Okay.
We're split down the middle.
Oh,
Is it really?
There's 9
Did the chair-
commission and 6 charter.
Did the chair-
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is based on the last notes, which was, we have to have, is it all plus one?
Well, I don't hear anybody.
So I'd like to make a motion that we take this, that we take what is currently in the charter and we move it over to an outside commission to evaluate the appropriate compensation for mayor and council members on an annual basis.
Second.
Can I ask a little amendment to
Yeah,
that?
of course.
That we might want to adjust the compensation now and say in the future, so that we don't need to wait, so we set, this will be the new salary.
But you risk
and
the
in
voters
future
not
it'll go-
approving it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You risk the voters not agreeing with
Yeah.
the new set number. Just let it pass 1 year and let the commission adjust it on their first go
No,
around.
but
But basically,
Jody,
you're saying then that we're punting. 17 of
No,
us
it's
can't make a
called- it's
decision.
called delegating.
So.
That's
And
precisely my point.
I would like to see that we are adjusting it so that we have a new baseline, just like they did previously in 2000, I guess it was, where they reset it. So I think we're out of whack and we need to reset it and then say, okay, it was a commission of 17, and then in the future, we make it a commission of some smaller number.
Yes.
But think about this because
Can I ask for Tino to?
Yeah, I want to rehear
Yes,
that motion, please.
so the motion is that we change the charter such that we will have an independent commission on an annual basis, determine the appropriate salary for the mayor and city council members. Additionally, I would like to accept Jody's amendment and give the council, in the meantime,
Yeah, I can't remember that.
so then that's the second motion. So let's leave my motion and then you can make another motion.
That would say, we have a commission for the future.
Yeah.
And then we can make another motion about what we want to set.
But can I comment on that? Because realistically speaking, we're trying to put this on the ballot for November. Any change to the charter, whether it's bumping it to 15,000 a year or whatever number you want to pick, or putting it in a commission, it has to go on a general election.
Right.
So if you're already going to go to the
So let me-
commission,
let me
then
make
let the
this
commission
easy.
just
Let me-
assert.
let me-
We have 5 minutes to make a
Let me make
motion.
this easy,
Because
okay?
then I'm moving to something different.
And that this commission will meet at the beginning of every year.
Yeah.
That way, if they approve it, they'll meet on January 1st, 2017.
They
and
typically
set it
meet
right away.
annually.
And they meet annually.
And we're going to set that annual date to be January.
January 2nd.
Who's
This
gonna
is
set
not
the
what-
motion?
this is
Who's
not what
gonna
we're
set
chartered
the
to do
commission?
here.
Who's gonna set the
This is not what we're
commission?
chartered to do.
That doesn't work for a charter, you can't do that. That's so
And who's gonna appoint the commission?
Because you can't do once a
Yeah.
year for a
If you
staff
do this
employee.
amendment that we're going to give them this much, and then we're gonna go to commission, what in the world?
We're not doing the amendment.
Yeah, then.
People don't know what, are we voting, you can't vote on two separate,
Yeah,
you're voting on
So
two
we're-
separate things.
we're voting
Either
on
vote
one.
to take it out of the
I
charter and the
agree.
council gets
Yeah.
nothing right now, is that's what we're doing. Or we give them something now
Right.
that's going to be
Yeah,
in
it's
the
too
charter.
convoluted.
You can't do it,
Yeah.
I can't do it so
I'm
convoluted.
fine with that. We can
People
just say
will,
go to the
no,
commission
and
if that's.
nothing will
So,
fly.
so
Yeah, I agree.
Jeannie, but listen to what Tino's suggesting as
No,
the amendment, as the modified one. He's saying that we'll set it as a commission, and we'll have the commission in January, whatever date in January, set the new salary. So if this goes to the November election, as soon as it passes, then the commission will come on board and immediately raise their
But what if it
compensation.
doesn't pass?
What if it doesn't?
And then we have failed.
Well, what if it doesn't pass to
It's
raise their
failed before.
compensation?
It's failed before, so what?
No, it hasn't.
Okay,
No,
let's,
hold on,
I think-
hold on.
go ahead,
We're,
sorry.
hold on. What we're saying is, we're gonna hope that the council can reword something that says a commission, that a commission will decide it, and the voters are gonna pass that. That's not what the chairperson said at the beginning. Our job is to figure out how we can increase their compensation. We can add, as the chief said, we can add in there also a CPI increase, so that, no, I'm just saying, it's just a recommendation. You can add in the CPI, as the former chief was saying, that would adjust it and bring it up to manageable levels as time goes on. But if we just say to the council, we want you to appoint a commission, they're gonna say to us, we just appointed you. You're the
it's like a
commission.
failure almost.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like us. We are the commission.
I would feel very remiss to come back to the council and say, sorry, we didn't do anything, we're gonna.
But we did do something.
Well, I don't think we're
I
doing
mean,
what they
to
asked us
say that
to.
because we don't give somebody money, we failed, is
I'm not-
completely missing the boat.
I
You're
don't-
establishing a commission that will review it once
I
a
mean,
year, not once every
who
6
actually
years.
appoints
San
San
Jose's commission.
I don't know.
I mean,
So let's,
It
the
is,
council.
it is clearly in
I'm
our
sorry,
instructions.
city clerk, sorry. Let-
Old habits die hard. Yeah, let me ask two questions with regards to the current tack that you're taking. And I don't have a bias one way or another if you keep it in the charter or take it out of the charter. If you do, though, decide to have an independent salary committee do it, I'd recommend that you simply say annually rather than set the time frame. In that if you do obligate them to do that in January, realizing that it may take more than a month to do that, you're going to have a hard time creating consensus in a short time frame, knowing that the holidays are right before that.
Right.
And it is also more likely that this will be coupled near the end of the fiscal year to be part of the budget discussion.
There you go.
So you simply say annually, the council, the city manager figure out what time frame during the year they would do that to allow that to be incorporated effectively into the next budget cycle, so they can budget for it. The next question I have for you guys is, there are a whole lot of different ways that these committees get created. Do you want that information before you make a motion, or is your motion simply that that's the tack you guys want to take, and in subsequent meetings you want some more information with regards to what your recommendation will be?
I would think, I would
Yeah.
think that we can
You have
make
to make the motion right now.
Okay, so the consensus was 9 to 6, okay? 9 people wanted it out. Now, the commission, going back to that, is you can have an independent commission, you can have an independent compensation survey that is done, just like we do with the soccer park and LPA. They go in and they do an assessment of the soccer park. It's a third-party independent. We make the assumption that the council has to appoint. No, they don't. You can have, like we do in corporate America. If we want to do a compensation study, I go out to a compensation expert, I get their opinion, they make the recommendation based on the data, like we're trying to do here, but they do it on an annual basis, so the charter doesn't have to come back every 4 years and have this discussion again and again.
That sounds different to a commission.
Then we don't have to call it a commission. We can call it, I mean, I'm willing to call it something different.
I think you just need
Or,
to state
or
how,
a
who
consultant.
is going to do this. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, we're gonna do this on an annual basis. Well, who's gonna do it? Is it the city council? Is it, who is going to, I think that needs to
I
be
mean,
designated.
independent, like an
So a
independent
third-party
auditor.
When you're making a
independent
motion.
auditor.
I could be behind that, but you start having friends and family.
Okay. So then can I change
Deciding.
it? So then let me change it, everything stays
No
the same.
offense to any
Beverly.
councilors
Okay.
here, but.
So everything stays the same. The exception is that the salary will be determined by an independent, third-party compensation expert.
Ooh.
But how do you bring that?
Why, you want friends and family?
No, she's
That's-
asking,
that's
she's asking
just
who,
one
like, let's be
expert.
specific, right?
It's like, what-
It's a firm, you don't do it's a firm, it's like LPA.
Yeah.
When you do a survey, you have a whole company. The company sits down and you don't call Joe Blow.
I just don't want one person making this.
Well, no.
Right.
Mary had her hand up
Yeah.
first.
I just wanted to say, I think that Rod's question was a good one, which is that it seems like there is a sort of majority of the sense of the group that perhaps we would like to explore an independent way to set in the future, but maybe we can learn a little bit more about, say, how San Jose does it or other communities do it, and so that we can be a little bit more informed about what the options are and how to, because I think Cecily's
I've
right
actually
that
worked in a jurisdiction
independent
that uses a
something
salary setting commission and have some experience with it.
Can I ask the maker of the motion to modify one part of it? Is to say, can we decide today, so we can move forward, right? Can we decide today that we do not want a specific number in the charter, and we will explore in a further meeting how we determine this external, whether it's a commission or an auditor or whoever, and we can decide that in an external meeting after we get educated from it.
Well, I think a motion means we're making a decision,
So I'm gonna
right?
remove my
So-
motion, and the reason being.
Thank you.
And the
Yeah.
reason being is because even though we have 9 to 6, there are still valid questions that have to be answered. And I don't think we're worried about the independent or whatever the case is. I think people kind of get, we want somebody who's independent, unbiased to do this. We just don't know how we should say it or how other people are doing it. And I think once we can learn that, then we can say, and we can get more of a consensus to say, okay, we go back to the council and say, hey, this is what we believe to be right. We want you to be reviewed on an annual basis. We want it to be fair. And we want the recommendation to come from a third party. That way, nobody can get caught up in shenanigans. So I'm going to remove my motion, and perhaps we could have a presentation by Ren or by somebody who knows the different ways. And I think that way we'll get more consensus.
I agree, okay. And-
That information is not difficult to pull and
So
bring.
could we get San Jose's information, how they do it too, Ren,
Absolutely.
please? Okay. All
So
right.
that's something I'm gonna put, Steve,
And-
last question, because then I have to get moving in
Okay.
10 minutes. Go
Very,
ahead.
very quick. I think Brian still has an outstanding question about whether we should even be talking about this, and maybe the city attorney can weigh in on whether this is within the scope of what the city council has asked us to do, so we can remove that question. The other thing is, if we're going to look at this, I think we ought to look at whether we really need to do it annually, maybe to try to take the politics out of it. We should do it in a non-election year or something. And the third question directed to the city manager is, what does this do to you if if we're adjusting the council every couple of years when you're negotiating with the bargaining units every 4 years? Is there a negative impact on you?
Actually, I'm not really sure it has a negative impact, but it also depends on what the percentages are. When you're right in the middle of negotiations with public safety, for example, or general employees, and you're offering them, a 1 or 2% package, and then you have a outside committee or a consultant or however you set up your methodology for adjusting, they come back and they decide that, well, maybe they get 10%. Then the employees say, well, wait a minute, why shouldn't we get 10%? I mean, I've seen that happen over the years, and but ordinarily, it gets worked out. So I don't know if it's going to be a huge impact. I was just noticing the numbers here. If you're going to create a commission or an outside group or a consultant to come in and help you with this, it would be helpful if you right-size your modeling. Like, for example, we're 120,000 population. We have an enterprise fund of $450 million, but we also have a general fund of $180 million. It would be helpful to look for similarities in organizations that have the same size enterprise fund. We show enterprise funds here, but we really have an electric department, and there are only a few cities in California that have an electric department. I think it's important to try to find cities that have that type of operation, because I think you'll probably end up seeing that the salary packages in these cities like that with probably bigger populations probably are paying much more. So that's probably something to take a look at. You know, if you want to go to another type of analysis, you know, general law cities don't set their salaries for council. It's set in state statute. And it's based on population. So given your population in the statute, that's what your councils receive. And every year, I believe, the legislature adopts a percentage increase in that. So that's done. And some cities tend to use, well, general law cities use that. Charter cities don't have to use it, but I would suspect that some charter cities probably model after that. So it just depends on how you want to set it up. But no, I don't think overall it's going to be a problem. I think they work hard. They deserve the raises that they get. I think right now what they're getting paid is probably not what the market bears, probably less than what the market bears. And if they haven't gotten a raise or an adjustment in 5+ years, they're probably out of the market. So, but how you model it, how you do it, I commend all of you. You all have great ideas. I'm just listening. I wish you luck in finding the perfect model.
Okay.
Anyway, but we'll follow your lead.
What about the question of
Okay.
scope? You had two questions. One was for the city attorney regarding scope.
I think we can come back next week and talk about that. Is it in or out of scope based on what we're now looking at? And also looking at more information around how they've been set up in different cities.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I can easily answer the scope question. It is. I
Okay.
mean, they tasked the group to look at the methodology as well.
Okay. Okay, good, thank you. All right, so next week's meeting, for future meetings, we're gonna get more information around how other cities who have done this, how they've done it, and get some recommendations and reword and kind of discuss this and kind of move forward at least this one topic. I hope to get that done next week. In the meantime, are there other topics for future? I know we have a couple more things to do that are even bigger, like this whole districting thing. I would advise that you guys continue to read on that. And at the same token, for the third issue where it talked about the charter changes, it says updating any charter provisions that were either outdated or no longer compliant with applicable law. So I would suggest, this is just a suggestion, that you guys start thinking about that and maybe coming up with some that you feel might be outdated. In terms of it being compliant with applicable law, I don't think any of us are have that background to make that opinion, because none of us are lawyers except for maybe Mary.
I am a lawyer.
Yes.
I am not an expert in this area.
So I would completely turn to, you know, the city council, the city attorney's opinion on that. But then the other piece where it talks about looking at something that's not at benchmark or no longer, or is outdated. I think some of us can come in with ideas of what those might be, write them down. What I'd like to do is get them all and then have somebody in staff help me put them in categories so we can start to consider those things too. Then after next week, if we can get through this, the next plan would go right into districting and looking at that chart, that focus. Does that sound good? Okay.
When you get suggestions for things to look at, maybe you could make a list of that and pass it out to us so we can kind of get a feeling of what other people are thinking. Maybe there'll be several people that are interested in a particular area.
Sure. Yes.
I'm sorry, did you say if we have suggestions of things to look at, we email it to you, or just say it now?
No, bring it, think about it, read your charters, right? And then next week, if you could bring it, I don't care how you bring it, you can email it to me, or you can bring it to the meeting. I want to collect them all and then work with Yvonne on how we can put them in categories and summarize them, and then repass them out so that we can start getting some traction on that, because we're gonna run completely out of time if we don't do two things at once. Okay, Steve, I know Steve and then Steve.
Can we get what that state standard is for council compensation?
Yeah, that would be interesting. And
Well, I just want to suggest that something to think about. Maybe we do want to meet more often than every other week, just because I think we need to get ramped up to really move. Just something to consider.
so that's something you guys we all need to consider that because everyone has time constraints. I don't know if that means another day or if it means extending this meeting, which we tend to override anyway. So it's something that you guys personally need to think about, and then maybe we go around the room again next week and talk about that.
In 2 weeks.
Or I mean, sorry, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That should be almost
Keep
every
scaring
week. Maybe we should do every week.
You love it.
I will say we've got budget hearings coming up and a number of study sessions for the related project where we are stacked with evening meetings for the next 3-4 months.
Which is when we need to make a decision on that.
What is the deadline if we're going to have something put on the ballot? What is the deadline again that we need to have everything accomplished
You'd have the recommendation to the council by June.
by June?
So we don't have a lot of time. Yeah. Okay.
But for me, for those who want to go and keep it in the charter, what would be helpful is if maybe you had some simple to get at numbers that we could just possibly look at, and maybe if we decide, okay, look, after all this, maybe we keep it in the charter or whatever, at least we have something to work with, because I know I have some numbers, you've done some numbers, you know, there's, the chair's done some numbers, Hassan's done some numbers, I think Mario, I don't know if you did some numbers, but that way we at least have something to chew on if we say, no, we gotta keep it in the charter, because as Saskia said, there's merit to both. We just have to decide.
We already
You know.
have decided. It was 9 to 6.
There was no motion for that. It was
Well,
just to get a
but there's
feel.
not, I mean, we have, but
We haven't officially.
Yeah, no,
We're gonna think some more about it. That's more information.
we need more information, so, okay. All right, so we need to go into public presentations, so David Chadwick, sorry. Did I say that?
Madam Chairman,
I actually asked to speak on item 4 and on off-agenda stuff in that, so I'll talk about the stuff I wanted to say about item 4 first.
Yeah.
3 minutes for each or 3 minutes total?
3 minutes total, because you're close to the time, sorry.
Well, I think that to a certain extent you're looking at the wrong things in your discussions about council compensation by comparing to cities with similar budgets, populations, et cetera. That's kind of a proxy for the workload, and I think that what you really ought to be doing is looking at what the workload is and should be, and then figuring out how to pay that at an hourly rate that makes sense, that the median wage of people who work in the city, the median wage of city employees, some percentage of those, or some multiple of minimum wage or something, but figure out how much work there should be in terms of hours per week or hours per month that council members ought to be doing, and pay for that, not just some amount. And I think that if you come up with that, it ought to be something reasonable. If you paid council members full-time and gave them each one full-time staffer, that would still come to a bit over 1% of the general fund and well under 1% of the combined budget. That's not out of line for something to spend on the top-level governance of a large enterprise like that. And the reasonable thing you come up with will be something less than that. The last thing I wanted to say is that what you really ought to be doing, and I think it got mentioned once in the general discussion at a previous meeting, is look at a way to have compensation that can allow ordinary people to serve on the council without devastating their work lives or their family lives or both. Pay people enough so that they can take time off from work to put in the time needed to be a good council member. Not have something like, I believe currently there's 6 the council members, all but one are either retired or self-employed at a job where they would have really flexible hours, and that's typical for Santa Clara councils to have a distribution like that you don't have ordinary people who work full-time jobs as a significant part of the council. The other things there they are, were things that I had been intending to say at the end of the last meeting, only it ran so late I had to leave for something else before a public presentation. Were made of mostly correcting some of the stuff about the Voting Rights Act that the city attorney had said. I believe Steve Chess had mentioned that Santa Clarita did not go to districts as a result of cumulative voting settlements fall apart, but I'm not sure of that. There was another case involving the city of Highland in Southern California in recent months where the judge, in his opinion, at least as reported in the newspaper, explicitly said that cumulative voting maybe wasn't appropriate in that situation, but is authorized and could be appropriate in situations under the CVRA as a remedy. And let's see, what you want to...
Time. Thank you very much.
In the future, are you going to follow the Crown Act and allow members of the public to speak on agenda items and not just at the very end of the meeting under public presentations?
We're following the Crown Act.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? Otherwise, I'll adjourn the meeting.
One of the things, I just want to throw a balloon out there, to look at we're discussing the redistricting, we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks. One of the things that I want to bring up is also something we can consider this is term limits. Abolishing, making a change in the charter, so just do 2 years, that's it, no sitting on one term, and bringing it back up again.
2 years?
Like, 2 terms, excuse me. And just sitting on one term, that's it.
Like the idea of 2 years?
Okay, your investment. So that's one of the a lot of the voters out there, they have concerns with that. Just do two terms and that's it.
And that's it.
And that's it, you're done. Thank you very much. So that will bring more diversified council to it, for making some people over and over and over again.
Okay, and that's going to be a topic in the future.
No, we can bring it back on floor and put it in the ballot too if we can. I think that's going to be very important.
Okay, and did everybody sign? Yes. Okay. All right, meeting
No, we
adjourned.
need it back there.
Mario needs to sign in after your last
Are we adjourned? Yes.
Choir.